We're going to get started in just a couple minutes here. Give everyone a chance to settle in. Thank you all for joining. This is an open meeting. We are recording so that we can play the transcript or put the transcript on the website and put the video on the website for those who couldn't make it. As you can see, we're doing this as a regular Zoom meeting, not a webinar, so that we can see each other and be more interactive. That does mean we ask that everyone mute when they're not talking. On or off camera is fully up to you. The chat box will be open the whole time, and we're looking forward to some really good engagement. My name is Michael Aiken. It's my pleasure to be our facilitator tonight. I have the pleasure of working with the college on a number of community engagement efforts. Our job is to make sure that the community voice is reflected in this process and that all of this feedback is used in really productive ways and constructive ways for the facility planning process and everything else that the college is doing. Got a really good and solid agenda tonight. The primary thing that we're trying to accomplish this evening is to make sure that everyone understands what the facility master planning process is that is underway and how best that you can participate in it. We also want to get lots of your feedback and engagement throughout. So not a meeting where we're going to be talking at you the whole time. We have a lot to share, but we're also looking for a lot of feedback as we go. We're going to get an opening from the college, and then we're going to bring in some of the consultants who've been working on the plan, and we'll go from there. The facilities master planning process has started recently, and there's been a number of internal engagement opportunities for faculty, students, and staff, but we know it's very important to us that we have the neighborhood voice represented. So we really wanted to host these series of meetings to make sure our neighbors, whether you live, work, or play in the area, and the external stakeholders really get a voice. So we're going to prioritize as much feedback as possible from that group this evening. So with that, I see some familiar faces here that have attended. Nice to see you, Richard. Number of folks who've been on our quarterly meetings here. So thank you all for joining. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Brad Stewart to give us the official welcome. Go ahead, Brad.
Thank you, Michael. I see all kinds of familiar faces and see all kinds of familiar names. Welcome to this facilities master plan meeting, where our main goal is to elicit from all of you your feedback and your opinions about planning for Montgomery College's next decade from 2023 to 2033. The slideshow is popped up on the screen there. There's a picture of one of our students in her graduation robes. Graduation is May 19th. If any of you would like to show up and attend, maybe we can figure out a way for you to do that. Next slide, please. So it's been a while since some of us have talked specifically about the current state of Montgomery College. The pandemic changed some of our enrollment patterns and some of our course delivery patterns, et cetera. And so I just sort of like to refresh your memory by talking a little bit about MC by the numbers. So at any given semester, there are roughly 40,000 students attending Montgomery College. A big chunk of those students are credit students seeking credentials. There are also a fair number of students taking technical and workforce development classes. Some of those are seeking credentials as well to enter right directly into the workforce. 66% of our students are part-time, which is different from what most people think about when they think about a college. Our students' average age is 24. So they're a little bit older than people normally think of as college students. Our students face some substantial economic challenges. 24% of our students receive Pell Grants and other forms of federal financial aid. And the average income household for our Pell Grant recipients is only $27,000. About 49% of the Montgomery County public school graduates who stay in state for college attend MC. So we're a local focused higher education institution. That means we're there where you need us. We're in the up county, we're in the mid county, we're in the down county, and we're just about to expand over into an East County Education Center as well. We have a wide variety of programs, 144 of them at last count, degree and certificate programs, from mechanics to engineers to lab bench workers to scientists here at Tacoma Park Silver Spring. And specifically, we are producing health science graduates and nursing graduates as fast as we can to meet the demands triggered by the pandemic for local healthcare providers. We're a very diverse institution. 79% of our students are students of color. 155 this last time we looked, 155 different countries of origin are represented on our campuses. Tuition is very reasonable, just over $5,000 for an academic year. Faculty members are the high quality. Many of our faculty members have doctorates. 9 of them over the past few years have earned Maryland Professor of the Year recognition awards. And 48% of our new full-time students graduate or transfer within 3 years of entering Montgomery College. That's probably the number I'm most proud of tonight. I'd like to turn it back to Michael Aitken from Link Strategic Partners, and he's going to give us an agenda for tonight, and then we'll start the meeting.
I appreciate that, Brad. Got more neighbors joining us. Hello, Paul. Good to see you, sir. We are going to proceed through this meeting so we can get to the Q&A portion of it. Brad just did our introductions. We're going to get an overview of what the planning process looks like, the current status of the project, and then we'll have an open discussion. As I mentioned before, it's an open Zoom meeting. Chat is open throughout. Please feel free to drop any of your questions or thoughts in there. When we get to the discussion prompts, we've got about 3 very specific prompts. We're not looking to limit dialogue, but there are some prompts that really help us get some feedback that's going to be essential for the planning process. And then we promise that after that prompt, we will leave plenty of time for general Q&A and any questions you have about anything that's raised in the presentation. We can go to the next slide, please. Let us introduce some of the team, the folks that are on here. So you've met Dr. Stewart. Carrie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Carrie Norberg. I'm the Planning and Design Director and the point of contact for this facility master plan. Welcome.
Excellent. And I'm Michael from Link. We're the community engagement folks and making sure community voice is prioritized and represented throughout the process. And I'm going to turn it over to Mike, our friends from Canada Design, who are leading the facilities master plan process, to introduce himself and his team and take it from here.
Hi, it's great to be here.
People in this group.
There are a few people who may be familiar from our presentation on Tuesday. I see a couple of familiar names, but great to be here. My name is Mike Glaros. I'm the planning principal for this project based in the Baltimore office of Canada Design. And I have on screen with me, Francis Fox.
Hi, everyone.
Francis is our lead planner for the project. So Canada Design is a firm that's been around for a century. We have started in our education practice right when the firm started 100 years ago, and we've been doing education work ever since. We've done many, many master plans as well as buildings across the country for many different institutions. And we often spend our time working in the context of historic neighborhoods and districts that are adjacent to the campuses on which we work. So some of you may know the folks from Link Strategic Partners and of course from the college, but we'd like to get to know you a little bit. So we have a couple of questions we'd like to ask. We have a couple of mechanisms we'd like to use, and one of them is here, the menti.com. If you can either use that QR code on your smartphone or go to the website on your smartphone or the laptop you're using for this meeting, it would be great to be able to get your responses recorded. I see somebody started to log in here. Francis is also going to drop the link into the chat if that's helpful for you. And just a reminder, if you are using your laptop, you will have to toggle between the Zoom meeting and your web browser to keep track of both the responses in the survey as well as watch the presentation. All right, a couple of people have logged in. All right, is anybody having trouble? All right, so first question we'd just like to know is how long have you lived in Montgomery County? Obviously, some of you may not have. This is a virtual meetings, so maybe you don't live in the county, but we're just trying to get a sense of how long folks have been in and around the county. All right. So it looks like it's a kind of even split between folks who have been here for quite a while and some folks who have been a little bit more recent to the county.
How do you do it?
All right. And have you ever attended classes at Montgomery College now or quite a while ago? All right. A couple of grads from long ago. Good to see. And have you participated in previous planning meetings with Montgomery College? Is this something you're accustomed to? All right. Looks like you guys are experienced and seasoned, so we should be getting some good commentary. Well, we thank you very much for that input, and we'll give you a brief overview, and then we'll come back to that same software in order to do some Q&A and receive some feedback. So for those of you who don't know, a facilities master plan is something that is required by the state every 10 years from all the institutions across the state. So the last one was completed about a decade ago. And the purpose of the plan is really to develop a framework that allows for projection of capital expenses against the mission and the vision of the institution, enrollment projections, new endeavors, academic offerings, whatever they may be that are coming up over the next decade. It's there to address relationships between the campus and the adjoining communities. It's also there to kind of relate to business opportunities that may exist between the campus and the county. And it really does kind of focus on that mission and vision of the institution as it relates to all of those things. So this facilities master plan is going to include an assessment of the existing facilities. This has actually already been conducted by the college, and we're using the data that has been provided by an outside consultant to kind of assess where things are. And we're also looking at the utilization of those buildings. So we've received a ton of spreadsheets regarding class utilization, and we're sorting through that and looking at where people are spending their time. As I mentioned, the facilities master plan is really tied into strategic planning documents that the college has developed. It's really a framework that is created around those. So this facilities master plan will include those documents like their enrollment management plan, their strategic vision, and other planning documents that have been created. And it will create an implementation strategy that begins to think about the sequence of operations to allow for the development of facilities on campus. So it's a very high level document. It does look at what the existing conditions are on the ground and what the future possibilities are, but it's not a detail-oriented implementation strategy or a document that really gets into the details of what will be the design of a building or the construction of it. So, as I mentioned, there has been a plan in place for decades, and the last plan was generated around 2013. So what did it show? The master plan showed the development of a series of buildings and other improvements on all three campuses, which really projected long-range needs, some of which fall outside of the 10-year timeframe. So at Tacoma Park and Silver Spring, this is what the campus looked like in 2013. And since then, there's been some construction started, which has impacted the campus. So there's been the demolition of a couple of buildings to make way for the math and science facility. And currently what's happening on campus are two construction projects on the Tacoma Park side. The first is the math and science building, which is underway and should be complete in early 2024. And the second is the Resource Center Library renovation, which is also underway and should be in 2024. So those are the two pieces of the previous master plan that are currently underway. The other thing to consider is the East County presence. The college has committed to development of an East County presence, and that includes an East County Education Center, which is a 55,000 square foot leased property that is currently under construction, or at least permitting, and should be open in the fall to allow for classes in that region of the campus. It's the first step of what is planned to be an expansion to a new campus within the East County region, which is broadcast, will be part of this plan. It'll be started in the next 10 years, but we don't know when implementation will happen. So in terms of the schedule for this process, here we are in April. We're still in what we call the discover phase. We're kind of tipping into May a little bit, but this phase is kind of an early part of the plan where we really reach out to various stakeholder groups. We've done student surveys, faculty and staff surveys, and we're having the community meetings to kind of gather information and get a better understanding and context for the college and its many campuses. So once we have that kind of rounded out, we're going to start to move into what we call the develop phase. During this phase, we're going to sort of assess the information that we've learned during discovery and develop themes and concepts that we can use to put a framework around the plan as we move forward. As we get towards the summer, we will get into the detail phase of the planning process, where we really look at what projects might make sense to kind of address issues on campuses, how they could be sequenced, what are some of the details about those plans, and can they work? And ultimately, we'll pull all of that detail back together sometime in the fall and create a final report or facilities master plan that we will come back to you and present in the fall. And that needs to be approved by the Montgomery College Board of Trustees, and then ultimately submitted to the state for approval early in the winter of 2024. So as some of you may know, we had a college-wide public kickoff meeting on Tuesday, and now we're starting a series of more intimate meetings with each of the campuses, including this meeting. So this is the first public meeting for the Tacoma Park and Silver Spring campus. And then later this month, on the 25th, we're going to have a walking tour of the campuses to solicit feedback from any constituents that want to come join us about the existing facilities on campus, special attributes and areas we should be aware of, just to better inform us as we're developing our plans. And we will come back and have a focused public meeting in early June as well. That'll be a time where we can talk about what we're seeing and give you some feedback on what we've heard. We also have a series of meetings that you're all welcome to attend for the other campuses, which include early June for Rockville, Germantown, and the East County presence. Once we get through all of that, and of course we spend some time over the summer working through the ideas that we understand, we will come back in the fall sometime in September, and we'll set a date to give you a presentation of the draft plan. So some initial observations, we've had some meetings with students, we've had some meetings with faculty, and we've had one community meeting. So we have some first impressions and some things that we're using as a guideline as we move forward. So first of all, obviously, this is a very unique and interesting campus. The Tacoma Park side of the campus is really located in and amongst residential neighborhoods, and it's adjacent to a historic district, so things that we need to take into account. The Silver Spring side, on the other hand, is a much denser, more urban environment set along Georgia Ave, and that's highly visible. There is an existing MOU that provides us with guidance about future campus development that we have to take into account. So we're acknowledging that and looking forward to using it. And obviously the campuses are bifurcated by both a rail line and a jurisdictional line that sort of provides some challenges and is both physically and metaphorically bridged by the college. This campus, because of the density of it, is primarily served by structured parking. There's parking on both sides of the rail line, and while there are a couple of small surface lots, most of the traffic is really focused on those two facilities. There are a number of means of transit to get to the campus as well. Some of those, including rail and bus lines, are not immediate to the campus, but they are accessible to the campus from those different means. And, we're also fairly close to I-495, depending on the time of day. 10 minutes at the middle of the day, maybe at the shoulders of the day, it's more like 30. Another thing that we took note of is the original buildings on the Tacoma Park side are relatively inefficient for modern standards. Not a lot of windows or daylight, a lot of exterior circulation, kind of difficult to use and not necessarily accessible. So something we're thinking about as we look forward. So in some of the original kind of conversations that we've had on campus, we started to develop a series of drivers and themes that we're thinking about as we look forward. Obviously, this is a college, so academic delivery is one of the main things that we're thinking about, and classroom utilization and how to think about how the students engage with the campus is kind of critical. As I mentioned earlier, we're looking into those space uses and utilization. How efficiently are the buildings being used, and what can we do to tweak or improve that? And then how can all of this lead to the success of the students as they come to campus? How can we help the college maintain and grow enrollment? And how can we help those students succeed and move out into the county as employees of many businesses that are out there? All of this is kind of tied into the culture and identity of the campus, and how can we think about the culture of each of the campuses and what might make them distinct and unique, and how can that influence what the plan will hold. And all of this is really wrapped up in some changes that are occurring, especially over the last 3 or 4 years, whether they be driven by technology or organizational changes. But there are changes going on that we need to address and accommodate within the plan. So with all of that, we want to begin thinking about what has changed since the last master plan. What are some things that are different now that are going to influence how the next iteration of the master plan is developed? And how can we create flexibility in our master plan to allow for some of the dramatic changes that we've seen over the last 4 years? They may not be predictable, but how can we allow for some flexibility as we look at those plans for the next decade? And then how can we think big and dream big over that 10-year period? Well, how can we be vision oriented and think about aspirations of the college community as it moves forward? So with that, we really I'm going to turn it back over to Michael to kind of lead us through the discussion. This is where we can kind of come back to the polling software, as well as open it up to the chat.
Thank you, Michael. Appreciate that. Folks, I know that was a lot of data, but we wanted to make sure we set the groundwork really well so we can have a good discussion. The point here of this next session, the rest of this meeting, is all about engagement and feedback and questions. Do it in whatever manner is most comfortable for you. If you prefer the chat box, it is open and will be actively monitored. If you want to use the software that Mike introduced, where you can use that QR code and provide your answers more anonymously up on the screen, we welcome that. And if you want to throw your hand up and get called on and do audio visual, we would love that as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to provide a few different prompts just to frame some of the feedback we're looking for. And of course, we welcome any questions more broadly as well. So this first question here, and welcome to all the folks who joined. I see we got some city officials here, which I appreciate, and some neighbors as well. The first question is trying to get a sense of how you most interact with the campus. So if you're a student, faculty, or staff, there's a specific way you're interacting with our campus. If you're a neighbor or a community stakeholder or an adjacent business owner, we don't want to make assumptions about how you're best and most interacting with our campus. We'd love to hear that. Can you share some examples? Are you coming to the Performing Arts Center? Do you use the library? Is it a place where you come and walk through because you like the park-like atmosphere? Trying to get a sense of what the interaction level is with our campus from our adjacent neighbors. Anyone willing to share what some of that looks like? Michael's got the polling software open, so we'd love to hear some of that up on the screen. And then we've also got the chat, or feel free to share it out. Anything specific on campus that you're using most, or the access points that you're using? Okay, so I'm interacting by walking around campus with my dog, and also some performances. Anyone use the library? Is the art center kind of the primary way that many neighbors are interacting with? We got a question coming up on how would you like to interact? So we're going to get there. But I teach on campus. Great. I neighbor. I walk over the pedestrian bridge and the occasional performance. I'm excited that my younger cousin is following in my footsteps and attending currently, and I'm heading to a performance there this weekend. That is fantastic. Theater performance, park events. Excellent. We'll keep moving here in just a sec, but if there are any other things that come up, feel free to share them at any point, just to make sure that we've got a full understanding of how the campus is currently used.
Michael, I'd like to just ask whoever put
Please.
up park events, if you could elaborate on what those events are and when they happen.
A great question. Whoever put that up there, if you want to, feel free to add some additional context around it. Okay. Any other feedback? Susan Alexander, that is a pretty epic mug. I just saw that come into the screen. That is a nice mug. Any other thoughts about how we interact? Okay, let's move to the next question. We only got about 3 of these. We know that Montgomery College has campuses in a few different locations, and this is something we're really digging into in these neighborhood-specific meetings. We don't want to make assumptions, communities aren't static, communities evolve, communities change. This community's evolved and changed since the last time we did our planning process. What are you seeing in the surrounding community that we should be aware of? What are some of the needs that the community may have that the college might be able to meet? What are the business changes? Are you seeing any differences in the types of businesses, difference in who's moving in and out, the size of families? Are you seeing any difference in language access needs, social service needs? The college wants to think through facilities planning, not just as buildings, but how does our programming support that? We heard in one of our meetings a real need for more nurses and more folks in the health sciences, and the college is really making an effort to grow their programming there. So trying to think through some of that. Any of those community context changes that should inform some of our planning. Thanks, Richard, for what you put in the chat about students walking by, public safety, walking through campus, and good to sense a learning atmosphere. Are there any community or neighborhood changes, shifts, evolutions that we should be aware of as we're doing our facilities planning context? Completely okay. If not, just want to make sure we're opening up the space for that. Excellent. We're also going to give you some ways to submit feedback after the meeting as well. But really, we'll move to the next question, but I really would welcome, I think the college is taking really seriously its responsibility to not just meet kind of on-campus needs, but to be dialed in. In our county-wide meeting Tuesday, we had some really good feedback about community gardens. We had feedback on food access needs. We had feedback on language needs that college might be meeting in their surrounding community. It's a great question, Beth Ann. We're defining it pretty broadly. For the sake of tonight's meeting, we're really focusing in on the Tacoma Park Silver Spring neighborhood, but we would welcome feedback on the broader community as well. Richard talked about community growth, more expensive, more vehicles, driving, parking. Absolutely seeing all those. Is transportation access getting better or worse? In our county-wide meeting, there was a lot of feedback around what is or isn't serviced by buses and rapid transit and bikes and all of that. So any of that type of stuff, we just want to make sure we're operating within the context of the community that we're a part of. We've got a point up here about we're losing our tree canopy. Vacant classrooms should be converted to offices for small business owners to rent, also for internships, for practical hands-on real life experiences like lab work. Getting a thumbs up there from Brad, right? The way students are using campus is changing. For those of you who've been on our quarterly meetings about why the Tacoma Park Library and Resource Center is being renovated, the way libraries operate is different, right? So how can we rethink our spaces in that way? More crime in the neighborhood like everywhere else. The public safety considerations. Anything else that we're missing that would be helpful for a planning context? These are helpful. Okay, Mike, let's go to the next question here. Public safety is, yep, excellent. So this is an interesting one. This is where we kind of ask you to put on your future caps, right? As you project out what some of the needs are going to be for your community, again, both locally and countywide. We want to make sure we're thinking through some of the trends that are upcoming. So I mentioned before that in some of our discussion with some of the county officials and city officials, we've talked a lot about the shortage of nurses and health professionals and what the college can do around that. How does that fit into a facilities planning discussion? As I'm sure Brad is more than happy to unpack, there are some really innovative labs being built on some of the campuses that let people learn how to be nurses in really innovative, cutting edge ways that can quickly fill some of those shortages. We heard in our countywide meeting, as more AI and computer science needs come up, how are we preparing for that? Outdoor classrooms, excellent suggestion. So just trying to make sure we're kind of looking forward. And Brad, if I may, don't want to put you on the spot here, but you had some really great observations about how the college thinks about what types of academics are kind of at the forefront. And I've talked a bit about the health science. Anything that you want to add in terms of context around that? You're on mute, sir.
So each of the disciplines in the college has a community advisory board where we seek members from local businesses, from local organizations to provide advice, most importantly, about what our students should look like when they graduate from us, to be employable and to best serve these particular organizations. We also do a great deal of research on all economic data that's available. So see what it tells us might be the careers of the future. Of course, that's a tricky thing because many careers for students who graduate in 5 years don't exist yet. We are intimately involved with all of the hospitals and healthcare facilities in Montgomery College right now to turn out a wide variety of health care workers, ranging from registered nurses to we're thinking about an LPN program again. I don't know what the outcome of that thought process will be. Certified nursing assistants, phlebotomists, pharmacy technologists, etc. We are even having conversations with some of our other brethren at Montgomery or at Maryland community colleges about a handful of four-year programs that might make sense because the University of Maryland system and other institutions are struggling to produce enough teachers, for example. They're struggling to produce enough cybersecurity workers, and they are struggling to produce enough healthcare workers.
Yep, that's really helpful, Dr. Stewart. I appreciate that. And as Susan from the college dropped in as well, thinking about how we better serve our community, how do we enrich the community, and how do we serve the students of today? In the countywide meeting, there was some good dialogue around, how easy is it for our students to patronize some of the surrounding community? Does the transportation infrastructure allow that to happen? How is that spillover economic development helpful? And then we got into some of the needs of the county and our students and families and how we might be able to address those. We got a good comment in the chat here, comparable to the math and science building purpose. Definitely more nursing facilities are needed, and agreeing with the comment noting connections to transit and EVs. Excellent. Oh, and I'm seeing a new one up here, more explicit connections to local businesses, paid internships, the co-op model, providing a track to a job. Like all of those. It's great. Anything else we're missing here? We're hiring more public safety officers and providing them with better training and education opportunities. Yep. It's great. Okay. Let's go to this next question and then we'll open it up for the broader dialogue. This is in a very similar vein. As you're thinking about how you would prefer to interact with the college, are there new or different ways you'd like to interact with the campus that aren't there currently? Are there ways you could see yourself as adjacent neighbors better interacting with or using our campus facilities differently? We want to make sure we've got all of those as we go into this planning process as well. Any new or different ways you think you could interact with the college and the campuses in the future? This is the easy and fun one. This is the, what are you looking to get out of this, right? There has to be some benefit from living next to a college. So we're trying to just make sure we're cataloging all of those as much as possible. If you think of any as we go through tonight, feel free to share them out. And again, we'll have 2 more meetings, including one where we're going to be walking the campus. And that'll be a really nice opportunity to point out some of those spaces and some of that. This is great. Thank you, Richard. Like to know how to support students better. What an awesome comment that is. It's a really great comment. There was a similar comment in the county-wide meeting we did on Tuesday night about how do we take advantage of some of the folks who live near our campuses who would love that opportunity to mentor and support and have a lot to contribute. How can we also make sure we're providing those learning opportunities that are lifelong in nature?
Michael, if I may, our students at community colleges face a whole host of economic and personal challenges. Many of our students face food insufficiency issues. Some of them face housing insufficiency issues as well. Mental health on all college campuses of all types is a hot topic right now to provide students with support from some of the challenges dealt to them by the pandemic. And there is room for community members in a number of different ways to help us with that particular thing. We have food pantries. We have clothing pantries located in various spots on the campus. We would welcome any kind of help anybody could provide there. We would love anybody with any kind of counseling skills to volunteer to help our students with some of their life challenges as well.
Thank you, Brad. Access to Art Center facilities for community initiatives as venues for our concerts and meetings. Excellent. Okay. My dog has been an ad hoc therapy dog for students during finals, but I would love to know how to support the things Brad mentioned. Brad, for folks like Beth Ann who might be interested in that, what's the best mechanism for them to learn more about that?
Probably the easiest thing to do is to email me. And it's my job to keep an eye on almost everything that goes on the campus. And I can connect them with the folks that they need to talk to explore some opportunities. So it's brad.stewart@montgomerycollege.edu. And I'll act as the information broker.
Love that. Can't get much more direct than that. Just email Brad. He'll take care of it. That's fantastic. Good engagement here. Let's move to this last question because this is the facilitator's favorite question. And this is the question about what didn't we ask that you wanted us to? What comments or questions do you have? Michael and his team did a pretty deep data dive. So any questions you have around any of that, where the plan is going, we want to make sure we're being as transparent as possible here. So we're completely open to any sorts of questions. It's not necessarily a planning question, but we got questions in the countywide meeting around kind of enrollment trends and what's happened post-pandemic and how we can support our students around that. So any questions you have, we are all ears and would love to have a discussion. Paul, thank you, my friend. Take it away.
All right, can you all hear me?
We can, sir.
Okay. I think you're doing a pretty good job of this planning process, but I think as neighbors, we have some particular concerns that could very well be addressed during the planning process. And I know that some of my neighbors raised a question about the decline of tree canopy in the area. A substantial amount of that, unfortunately, was due to the construction of the Leggett building, which we hope is going to be remedied when the building is finished. But Tacoma Park as a community had almost a 6% decline in mature tree canopy over the past 5 or 6 years. and our area was tagged as one of the worst. So I think we would certainly like to see whatever the college could do to try to reverse this situation. Other things that I think the neighbors have been concerned about, and I know I have, is that when the Leggett building was under construction, there was a fair amount of particulate pollution that got released into Sligo Creek. And I'm an active board member of Friends of Sligo Creek and was very involved in tracking this down. And I think that the college might need a campus-wide plan for erosion and sediment control during construction, rather than the piecemeal building specific plans that are issued through the Department of Permanent Services. And as a similar point to that, I don't think it's any secret that you guys are pretty noisy over there. And unfortunately, the campus always seems to be under construction, which means the campus is always generating noise. The recent activities at the Resource Center have unfortunately been very noisy. And trucks start mobilizing about 6:30 a.m. and the noise continues most of the day. I would also like to see a campus-wide plan for noise mitigation, which would include landscaping in addition to construction work. So I think these are more environmental or life cycle, life quality concerns that I would like to see entertained during the planning process, rather than being left up to specific activities in the future. And just as another completely different topic, I am, as some of you know, I am a former chemistry professor, and I've practiced chemistry for about 40 years. And I would certainly be happy to have some opportunities to come in and speak to students. I'm still active professionally, even though I'm older than the colleges, I think. To interact with students professionally, tell them about some careers in chemistry, where I think the career opportunities might be going, and what they could do to prepare for them. So if you ever have a need for that, and I know there are other people in the community with other expertise too, I think, who would be pretty happy to participate in these types of things.
Professor, I appreciate all of that. The depth of your answers is always something that I appreciate. Just to make sure we're getting these right, overall countywide tree canopies decreasing, want to make sure we're focusing on what that means locally in our plan. It's not just the impacts of individual building constructions. It's looking at the campus-wide impacts around noise mitigation, runoff, construction, et cetera. And then looking at the way that folks like yourself who have something to add to our students would be welcomed into classrooms to offer some of that expertise. Did I get all of that correct, sir?
You did, sir. You're good at this. We've been having these discussions for a long time. We really have a good dialogue going.
We got a good dialogue. I appreciate it. Those are all great. Brad, not doing your job for you, but there's something in that community teaching core, right? There's something in that core of expertise that I would really love to explore here a little bit. We've got a question up here, and Brad, I'm going to direct this one to you, but feel free to take it wherever. Has enrollment recovered after the pandemic? What are we seeing in kind of enrollment trends?
Yeah, our credit enrollment has recently stabilized and started to creep back up. The pandemic, we won't, not going to hide it. The statistics are out there. That was a pretty big blow to some of our credit enrollment. On the other hand, it did increase enrollment in certain programs. So the pandemic may have harmed history, English, and political science, but it drove up enrollments in nursing and health science. So it's always sort of a balancing thing. But overall, the college has sort of turned the corner and started to move back up in terms of that. New careers coming online that need new training is also, I believe, turning around the enrollment thing. And then our students and their families and their colleagues have realized that although we did a really good job of teaching via technology remotely and online, it's still not quite the same in terms of educational quality, particularly in what people learn from each other. And so we think that, and we're hoping and trying to recruit students to come back to campus for those experiences.
Thank you, Dr. Stewart. There's a question in here around what about the last master plan cycle would you like to see be different this time? I want to clarify whoever asked that. You're talking, I'm guessing, about the planning process around it or the plan itself. If you've got a clarification, let me know. Otherwise, we can kind of jump in on a broad level.
So that was me.
Hey, Susan, go for it.
This was a question I was hoping you might ask us.
Yes.
How would we like to see this planning process be different from the last one?
So Susan, before we go any further, there's a question I forgot to ask. How would you like this planning process to be different than the last one? I would love the answer to that, by all means.
I would like to feel that our feedback actually mattered.
Yep.
And that, for example, in the last time around, when the presentation was made, when all the conclusions were drawn and the presentation was made, there was no opportunity for the community to influence what would happen after that point. So it was basically, we'll do our research and we'll come to some conclusions and we'll present it to you, and then we'll get that approved by our ratifiers.
Okay.
But there really was no opportunity for the community at that point to say, wait a second, these things that you now have decided to do, we should really discuss them.
Yep.
So I was wondering if this time around, if there was time built into the cycle in between when you made that briefing saying, here's what we think we want to do, and when there's a decision to do it.
Absolutely. Hearing that loud and clear. So I'm hearing two things. We need to make sure we're kind of reflecting back. This is what we believe we heard. Have we gotten this right? And how's it been used? Then I'm hearing, will we have an opportunity to see what some of the recommendations and plans are from this process before it's too late, right? Before they've gone into the regulatory agencies. Am I getting those right?
Yeah.
Okay. So Mike and also Montgomery College, can we talk a little bit about the timeline again? I know there was a slide on it, but what is the timeline around when this will be done, when it'll be submitted, and then if we can kind of overlay when those engagement opportunities will be? Because Susan, the short answer is absolutely you'll have that ability, but I want to make sure we give you some clarity around what that might look like. Does that help?
Yeah, that would be good.
Michael.
So as I mentioned in an earlier slide, and we'll throw it up again kind of at the end of the presentation so you can see those dates, we do have these engagement periods over the course of June where we're going to be talking about some of the things that we're thinking about doing and soliciting your feedback at that point. And then, we'll go and work over the summer to try and figure out what all of that means and come back in the fall again with a draft presentation in September that will allow for you to kind of see where we're headed and what we're thinking and provide feedback at that point. And that's all before the final documents are created and submitted for any approval towards the kind of November, December, and then ultimately January and February timeframes. So there are a couple of points where we're going to have that opportunity. And you will also see there is a constant place where you can kind of go to the website, take a look at what's going on, look at any presentations you might have missed from one of the other campuses, and leave feedback there as well.
Does that
Okay.
sound right, Susan?
It's it could work. I think the crucial time is when after you have the draft recommendation, that there is sufficient time built in after that to have a true dialogue. Because what happened last time was there was a draft, it was presented, and that was it. There was actually no ability to influence it once there was a draft.
So feedback after the draft stage before the submission stage.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Great. I'm just making a note for myself. The other thing, hopefully, is apparent. There's no attempt here to do less engagement. Don't want to put too fine of a point on this, but if you looked at this schedule for the FMP as a whole, Tacoma Park Silver Spring has 3 dedicated sessions in there, because that is a commitment we've made, and also has worked really well as we think about the quarterly meetings and others we've been having. More engagement is better than less engagement. So we can also have some of these discussions and updates when we're having those quarterly project updates for Leggett and resource as well. So we'll continue to come back. We'll make sure, and I'm hearing agreement from the consultant, the college here, that there will be that opportunity for feedback after the draft stage. So I appreciate that.
Super, thanks.
Yep.
Michael, and what's different this time is two things. First, Link Strategic Partners is teaching us at the college something new every day about community engagement. And they're holding us accountable for how they think that community engagement needs to be done. And we're faithfully following their recommendations. This time we have a different architect who have more sensitivity towards community feedback and feeding that into the master plan as well.
Way to publicly apply the pressure on us, Brad. I like that. That was great, man. We take it very seriously. That was helpful.
Now you all
Paul.
both got to come through.
Exactly. Paul, go for it.
Okay, well, I underscore the shout out to Link. Having worked with them now for many, many years, I can't agree with everything you've done over there, Brad, but Link has certainly been a great asset for both the neighborhood and the college, I believe, in this process. So we hope to keep that pressure up, Mike, and drive it all the way through here. What I was just curious, this is definitely a question, but you're going to come up with this master plan, which is presumably going to involve some capital investments, right, in buildings and renovations and construction or what have you. How do you tie this in with the county's capital improvement program, with the SIPs that come out periodically from the county? And is there financial planning that's part of this process too?
It's a great question. Michael, could you pull the deck down so folks can see each other a little bit more? Who would like to take that question about how the capital planning process overlays? Susan Madden.
So there are folks at the college who have more intricate knowledge on this than I do, but certainly we are mindful of resources as we make plans in our facilities master plan. Being a good fiscal steward, taking care to use public dollars wisely is always top of mind for the college. That said, part of the challenge is always thinking about what our needs are and what we can reasonably ask for, right? So the facility master plan helps us articulate what are logical, thoughtful needs for the college to carry out our academic mission, right? And then the capital budget, Paul, is where we really have to think more critically about what's affordable, right? So we try to balance both during the planning process, what makes sense fiscally, what is likely to be approved and afforded. Then that gets refined as we think more critically about which project to move forward from which campus into the capital budget. And then it takes a long time for projects to be funded. We're having conversations with the state and county about a project on the Germantown campus that's been sitting in the capital budget for 16 years now. So it's a blended process, Paul, but certainly fiscal realities sit in our mind as we do planning. We're not going to build a building suggest a project or a building or a renovation in a facilities master plan that would never hold water for state and county funding. And we've got years of experience understanding about how we fit in the landscape for funding. For example, at the state level, we know that any one given year that the projects for community colleges, all 16 of us in the state of Maryland, are capped at $80 million, right? So if you know that at the outset that any one year, all 16 of us are capped at $80 million, you have a sense of what's doable and what's not. And we know that, Carrie knows that, Christina Schramm knows that. the great facilities team that's helping manage and lead this facilities master plan project. So we're not going to ask for or dream for projects that would never get funded, because that makes no sense, right? It just doesn't. I don't know if that's responsive to your question, Paul. If you want. me
Yeah,
to
I think it is. I'm
rephrase
getting
happy to
an
do that.
idea. You know, I've been following this process probably for about 30 years.
Right.
Just try to, to figure out more about. Are you in contact with our county council members and our state delegation members and things like that, to have maybe some discussions about what might fly and what might not fly?
We don't particularly discuss that at the facilities master plan process. We know we have parameters. The state, for example, gives us very specific parameters and guidelines, like, what's the size of a classroom? What's the size of a faculty member's office? What traditional, and we have lots of history to look at about what's been funded and not funded over the years. We can look at what other community colleges have requested and achieved funding for, and what we've asked for funding for, like you said, Paul, for 30 years. So we know what is likely to meet the test, right? And we know that the first step is placement in the facilities master plan. And so that's key. Then the state requires us to fill out these long documents called part 1s and part 2s. You wrote a PhD thesis somewhere in your lifetime. That's basically we have to do for every project. Then we got to get it through the community college funding model, which that's a process. And then all the projects have to fit within the $80 million cap for state funding for community colleges. And this Germantown Student Services Center, the one I just mentioned, that's a $130 million project over over the life of the project, right? You wouldn't ask for that much in any one year. You start off asking for design, then construction, and then for the furniture and equipment. But you can see if a project's 130 million over 4, 5, 6 years, how that bumps up against that $80 million cap in any one year. So we do have constraints that we have to work within. And certainly our county officials and our state officials know we're going through this facility master plan process, as all the community colleges are on the 10-year cycle.
Hey, thank you, Susan.
You're welcome, Paul.
Susan and Dr. Stewart and I had the opportunity to brief the Tacoma Park Council. What was that, Brad? 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, a month ago, sometime
10th.
recently.
April
We were
10th.
there. So we've been trying to keep everyone as looped in as possible. Other questions or comments? The only other formal things we have to show you is just a reminder of the dates for the next meeting. So really the rest of the time here is any questions or comments folks have that we haven't already gotten to. Anything we're missing?
Mike?
Richard's hand.
Oh, perfect. Richard, go for it, my friend.
Sure, just briefly, I like to step back and pretend I'm in another galaxy when I'm looking at a particular subject matter. A lot of people say that really seems to be the case. But just to remember that we're doing this for the students. I mean, this is important for the future of this country. And I'm impressed by what Montgomery College is doing on so many levels, and what these students graduating will be doing, and how we help them move on. We have a room in our house that we rent, and it's to a lot of traveling nurses. It is licensed. I see our, different representatives here from Tacoma are there. It's totally licensed, legal. But, it's exciting to see where this country can go and to see why you're doing all of this. So I start off with that and then take it from there. And I appreciate the fact that the technology allows us to have this interaction. So I just wanted to mention that. And I think all said and done, the fact that we've got this math and science building coming is great. And I realize at some point the Commons building, which is across from our house, something could happen to that, and that's fine. I think the important thing here is that there's the communication. And so I just wanted to say thank you for that. And it's nice to see the progress going with the building that's going on now.
Really important comments, Richard, and that perspective of why all of this matters is a good one to keep in view. So thank you for offering that. Susan, We have two Susans with their hands raised on the screen at the same time. Look at that. Susan Alexander.
Okay, although Susan Madden might have had her hand up first.
I think she was responding to the question before. Sorry,
Oh,
go
okay.
for it.
All right. Oh, Richard, you're so inspiring, but I'm gonna I have another question about that goes back to how things could be different this time.
Yeah.
One thing I remember from last time that maybe there's a way to build this in to the process this time. When the capital improvement projects got to the county council for funding, there actually was not a lot of information that helped people to understand why a particular thing was needed. So there kind of wasn't an activity-based cost model, sort of from the ground up, that said the college has to break the mission down into here's a thing we have to do, and in order to do this thing, we need to have these kinds of capabilities, and we're going to have these many people, and so we have to have this kind of a building, and so the building will have to cost this amount of money. And there was nothing like that anyone could really look at and say, yeah, that really makes a lot of sense. That makes total sense that we would need a building to do a certain thing, that would need to be a certain size, and that would need to cost a certain amount of money. I think to whatever extent the master planning process can get at those kinds of facts, so that really you can start to build support for things early in the process, instead of things seeming like they were just pulled out of the air at the end. I think that would be very good for, turning the community into, the people who are really, paying for this, feeling like they can really support the thing that's been chosen, because it makes a lot of sense that thing would be having to be created.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
because it's interesting that Susan said that there's really no engagement with the county council in this master plan process, that it's all kind of this state thing, and there's an accreditor and all this stuff, and and there are all these kind of cookie cutter, we know how big a desk is and how big an office is, that doesn't really fly with people who are trying to understand if a certain plan is the best way to deliver the capabilities that need to be delivered. So
Yeah.
I think the earlier that can be dealt with, then the better.
Yep. That I'm tracking all of that. And it's kind of, how do you build the case for some of these investments? Transparent data sharing process, all of that. Yep. I'm following that 100%.
Yeah. Thanks.
Perfect. What else, folks? Okay, so I'm going to ask Mike to put the slide deck back up. Still open for questions, but I want to show the timeline. There was a question about if we can send this timeline around. Of course we can. We'll also make sure both the deck from tonight and the recording from tonight is posted to the website. If you go to this next slide here, the QR code, if you take a picture of it with your smartphone that's got QR codes enabled, it'll take you to this website. That is the website where all of the information is shared. We're also going to drop that in the chat so you can click on it very easily. So we've got information about the plan already posted. We've got an FAQ. So the questions that keep coming up, we're making sure we're answering those as proactively as possible. There's also ways on there to provide us additional feedback, and it's got all the information about the upcoming timeline. If one of my team members could drop that chat link in as well, it looks like that's already, thank you. Thank you, Francis. And then if we go to the next slide here, this is what Mike showed before. So we're going to come together again on May 25th. We're going to do this one on campus as a walking tour, so you can get a really good contextual sense of what we're talking about here. Dr. Stewart has promised us a beautiful spring day, and we're going to hold him to that. And then we'll come back together on June 6th for another meeting like this one to really dig in and look at where we're at that point. We're then doing we're doing a campus-based engagement or community-based engagement in Rockville on the 8th, Germantown on the 13th, and East County on the 15th. And then we'll be coming back together in the fall. That date is to be determined, but it'll be sometime in September. So those are our next engagement points. And I think the next slide is the all-encompassing thank you slide. Oh, look at that, the thank you slide. Is there any other comments or questions before we let folks get back to their evening? Okay, with that, Dr. Stewart, you opened us. I'll give you the last word, my friend.
Thank you, everyone, for attending tonight. We are keenly interested in what you have to tell us. That's probably the message that I want you to take away to your other friends and neighbors who weren't able to join us tonight. There are plenty of ways to provide us with feedback. The more ideas we hear, the better.
Thank you, Dr. Stewart. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.